Good morning and welcome to Data Talks Live. I'm Dr. Tom, and today we're going to talk about data. All things data, data in the news, data in research, and my take as a professor of data analytics and machine learning, as well as the head of an MBA department at a university and a professional with nearly 20 years of industry experience. So what's going on in the world of data today? We see an article, Yahoo, by Ian James. Amid a data center boom, California lawmakers pass a bill to track water usage. So data centers, among energy needs, also includes a large amount of fresh water. So it looks like companies that run data centers are facing increasing scrutiny for guzzling water in the dry western U.S. as artificial intelligence fuels a boom in the industry. California legislatures passed a bill this month that would require facilities to report their projected water use before they begin operating and thereafter to certify how much they use annually. The bill is waiting for Governor Newsom's signatures. So what's the concern? So clearly California has water shortages. They have issues with wildfires, so forth. So you could see how you would want to conserve and track how much water data centers are usually using, particularly as they pop up across the country. They use water for cooling their servers. They have to control humidity to reduce static electricity, which can cause stray currents, which damage equipment. And then electricity generation in general uses water for cooling. For example, in a nuclear power plant, typically you have to site the facilities near a source of freshwater cooling, like a river, so that you can cool the plant not only for normal operation, but in the event of an emergency. Liters of water per kilowatt of IT energy consumed is measured using the metric water usage effectiveness, or UUE. And there's also a measure of total water per facility or workload, which is often expressed in millions of gallons per year or liters per megawatt hour. So typically between 0.2 and 5 liters of water per kilowatt hour of IT load, depending on the cooling method. Maybe a 15 megawatt data center could use 80 to 130 million gallons of water per year if it relies on evaporative cooling. Some ways you might cool these facilities include evaporators or cooling towers, which is common in what they call the hyperscale, the large facilities, maybe chilled water systems, which use moderate water use, or air cooling, which has little to no direct water use, but can raise electricity demand. Think, fans. Or maybe a hybrid system, which switches between water and air depending on climate conditions. So maybe a medium-sized data center, which is 1 megawatt, might consume between 3 and 5 million gallons of water per year. In 2022, Google reported using about 5.6 billion gallons of water across its data centers worldwide, mostly for cooling. And Microsoft disclosed that its data centers consumed about 1.7 billion gallons in 2021, which is a 34% increase from the previous year. So you can see that the growth in data centers and the growth in cloud computing is also driving an increase in not only energy use, but also water consumption. But there are some trends emerging to mitigate this issue. Direct-to-chip liquid cooling, and immersion cooling to reduce water use, or maybe reclaimed and recycled water is increasingly being used. This is done in buildings as well. There's a certification called the LEED certification, which some environmentally friendly buildings pursue, where they use reclaimed water from collected on the roof, in the urinals and the toilets, for example. And similar to power plants, there's siting strategies that you can do with new data centers to put them in cooler or water abundant climates, unlike California. So I guess the benefit of this is cloud, right? So you could site these facilities in more water abundant regions and then connect over the web to utilize the data centers. I think one of the benefits that AWS or Azure likes to tout when they put together their marketing material is that if they have facilities or data centers that are local to where you're doing your computing, that you'll reduce latency. I'm sure that that is true to some extent. But, increased transparency, firms disclosing water use in sustainability reports alongside energy and carbon is probably a good practice, though I don't think from a regulatory perspective in most of the U.S. that's required, which is unlike Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, which does require reporting of those types of metrics. And now I guess California does too. Anyway, the bottom line, a hyperscale, quote, data center can consume about 100 to 200 million gallons of water per year if it's using evaporative cooling, which is about as much of as a town of 10 to 30,000 people. So it is substantial. What else is going? I was watching the press briefing with Robert Kennedy and Trump yesterday where they discussed the linking of Tylenol taken during pregnancy with autism. I don't have that much information on that other than when I brought it up to my wife, who is familiar with this. She's been pregnant several times, and she's a EDD candidate who is using machine learning in her dissertation. She said, classic case of correlation does not equal causation. We didn't talk any further about it. But I'm looking at an article here put out by NIH. NIH launches a $50 million autism data science initiative to unlock causes and improve outcomes. I did hear them talk about this during the briefing. NIH launched an autism data science initiative, a landmark research effort that will harness large-scale data resources to explore contributors to the causes and rising prevalence of autism spectrum disorder. More than $50 million in awards will support 13 pioneering projects to draw on genomic, epigenomic, metabolomic, proteomic, clinical, behavioral, and autism services data. These projects will integrate, aggregate, and analyze existing data resources, generate targeted new data, and validate findings through independent replication hubs. Our Autism Data Science Initiative will unite powerful data sets in ways never before possible, said NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya. By bringing together genetics, biology, and environmental exposures, we are opening the door to a breakthrough that will deepen our understanding of autism and improve lives. I think this is a good thing. I think the way they talked about this was that they're going to approach this more holistically. During the press briefing, they mentioned that a lot of studies that are done generally are really focused on analyzing kind of one specific element while controlling for all the other variables. And while that's scientifically sound, it seems like the initiative that they are doing is seeking to be more holistic. I'm not sure specifically how they plan to do that. Here in the article, it says ADSI will apply advanced analytic methods, including machine learning, exposome-wide analysis, and organoid models to study how gene-environment interactions contribute to autism and how other factors influence prevalence over time, and how current treatments and services may be improved. Sounds like a good thing. It's a collaborative effort managed by NIH's Division of Program Coordinators. A list of awardee institutions and project descriptions are available on the research page. So it sounds like they're going to be offering $50 million to do this. So $50 million in grants to study autism sounds like a positive thing. Looking at another, this is a preprint of an article that has not yet been peer-reviewed. That caught my eye. Anatomy of Peer-to-Peer Lending Fraud, a Review and Managerial Implications, which is a number of authors. I will put it in the chat. Peer-to-peer lending platforms have transformed the fintech sector by facilitating direct interactions between borrowers and lenders, eliminating the need for traditional financial intermediaries. Well, this innovation enhances financial inclusion and efficiency. It is subject to significant fraud risks, such as identity theft, misrepresentation, predatory lending, Ponzi schemes. These fraudulent activities undermine platform integrity and erode user trust. This paper presents a comprehensive systematic literature review of fraud detection strategies in P2P learning platforms. So, machine learning has been used for fraud detection sort of since the beginning. This is a really great application of machine learning. For example, you may have noticed credit monitoring systems that are monitoring your transactions in real time, which are scoring and alerting you of suspicious activity. It would be a text message that could be used to prevent and stop bad actors before onboarding or disbursement of your funds. It can be used for document verification using optical character recognition. It can decide to apply a risk scoring model with business rules to accept or challenge or decline transactions. It can provide investigators with context or evidence and case tools and audit trails. It can block accounts, freeze funds, notify customers. So how does that usually work? You've got some data ingestion, application data, transaction streams, device telemetry, credit bureau alerts. You take that data and you enrich it with maybe geolocation. So here's the location, or maybe a device fingerprint, some multi-factor authentication method. Then you create a feature pipeline. So you compute features, could be velocity counts, how often is this being accessed, ratio features, behavioral embeddings used by rules and machine learning. And then you create some real-time scoring method, and rules engine gets a fraud score, and the rule hits within milliseconds for decisioning. You've got some orchestration layer with business logic that allows you to either challenge, decline, or route for review the transaction, and case management in a feedback loop. So you've got the human in the loop, takes a look at the transaction and says, yeah, that was really me, or you need to give us a call. So this is a really good use for machine learning, especially now as data breaches are on the rise and probably higher than ever. And I don't see that trend reversing anytime soon. So we just need to get better at how we fight and mitigate these types of issues so that we can protect our money, right? That's a big deal. I'm concerned about that. I mean, I have my in-laws and other folks that I know are constantly having fraudulent transactions on their credit card, for example, though I think a lot of times it's that they had some spyware on their computer and got access to their password, or they left their credit card somewhere and someone grabbed it and went and bought some stuff at Walmart. But coming up with all of those use cases or those kind of failure modes of how this is happening, and then going down that list from kind of the maximum most likely to the least likely and coming up with a mitigation strategy for each of those is a good approach for how to reduce that type of fraud over time. And machine learning is one really great tool for how to do that. So something else, we've been talking a lot lately about Nvidia data centers. So I saw one. Nvidia plans to invest up to $100 billion in OpenAI as part of the data center build out. So this is on CNBC. This is by Kif Leswig and Ashley Kaput. Nvidia will invest up to $100 billion and to build out hundreds of billions of dollars in data centers. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang told CNBC that the 10 gigawatt project with OpenAI is equivalent to between 4 and 5 million graphics processing units and will ship twice as many chips as last year. So that stock will probably do well, and I believe has been doing very well. And these investments are ramping up and likely to continue. I watched the state visit with Trump to the UK, and many of the speeches and commentary were around the need to bolster AI investment and increase collaboration. So this seems to be the hottest of hot topics right now. I gave a talk on the podcast the other day about nuclear, and I said the biggest problem with nuclear, and I said a few things that were problems, but not necessarily the biggest. I missed it. The biggest problem, or one of the biggest, is these things are hugely capital intensive and take many years to build. Most or all the nuclear power plants that are operating today, if they were built today, would take a huge sum of capital. They would have to be properly sited. You would need to know how you would handle the waste, but also you need 10 years to build one of these things. For a company that wants to remain agile and make an investment where they understand, what the return on their capital is going to be, 10 years is a tough period of time to forecast. The cost of fuel will be significantly different. The price you can charge for energy will be significantly different. The regulatory environment in 10 years could be significantly different. So that is just a lot of risk for a modern company to take on without some substantial method for security, which is probably why you don't see huge amounts of nuclear reactors going up, at least in the United States, by private companies. I think we've done one, Vogtle. I think that was in Georgia. And before that, it had been like the late 70s or early 80s since they had built one. So, it's just too much risk, I think, for most companies to take on. That's why I think this modular nuclear reactor or small modular nuclear reactor is better and more economically viable, because you don't have to forecast economic conditions in 10 years, which, let's face it, is basically impossible to do. You can forecast economic conditions in 3 years and have some reasonable assurance that you'll probably be okay and, require far less capital. So I think that model, if nuclear power is going to be how we power data centers going forward, which I think is a good model, then it's going to have to be these small modular nuclear reactors. Otherwise, or the government's going to have to step in and mitigate some of the risk, because I think it's just going to be too much risk, and companies are not going to have an appetite for it. So we'll have to see. Right now, I see a lot of talk, but I don't see a lot of momentum behind that. There's been talk around small modular and modular nuclear reactors for a long time in the US, probably going on 15, 20 years now, but not a lot of action. That was also part of the press briefing during the state visit in the UK. I think they, in the UK, are actually planning to put up some modular reactors, which is good. Maybe proof of case concept for the US. We can replicate some of the best practices and some of the work that they'll be doing if that actually goes forward. I think probably what's more likely is you're going to see at these data centers a requirement to have generation in situ that's actually on the site with the data center, and basically providing a large fraction of or all of the capacity for the data center using a generating facility that's actually on the site. Combined cycle natural gas might be a good choice. That can go up pretty quickly, doesn't require a huge amount of staff, not as many regulatory hurdles. Not everywhere in the US has gas. Not that it couldn't, but there are pipelines everywhere. But it just seems like it's more likely to me, based on a number of economic factors in the US, like the political environment. A lot of people still have an unfavorable view of nuclear, and the availability of capital, the amount of time it takes to go up, how much labor is required. So we'll have to see. Something's going to need to be done. Hopefully it's not just we throw up a couple of backup diesel generators and put some more strain on the grid. Municipalities are going to need to get involved. I think that's it for today. So this has been another episode of Data Talks Live with Dr. Tom. I'm Dr. Tom, and talk soon. Thanks, everybody.